thanks for joining us for the Superintendent's Report. I'm Carol Birdsong, and joining me is Williamson County Schools Superintendent Jason Golden. And it is the last week of school in Williamson County Schools for the 23-24 school year. Finals are happening across the county. Graduations are scheduled, and we're wrapping it up and putting a bow on it.
As we record this, students have maybe 2 days left, day and a half, depending on how you count it. We are scheduled to have our graduations in just a couple of days. We have a 3-day window. We have 11 high school graduations within that 3-day window. I try to go to all the graduations I can. This year, because of scheduling, the maximum anyone can attend is 4. But I'm guessing that most folks who are watching this might be attending one graduation.
You know, several years ago we made that change at the district level because we used to have them go through Sunday, if you recall, and so now it's a little bit more compact, I guess, if you will, and that gives more people opportunity to, I guess, celebrate their graduates and walk that stage.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Sunday because some of our inclement weather plans at the schools actually do include Sunday. A few years ago, many of our schools had used the agricultural center for their graduation ceremonies. It happened that one year there was a scheduling conflict, I think with the rodeo, and so a lot of schools ended up going to their campuses and doing it on their football fields. And for so many of them, it was just great. It felt like home. Students were able to go to a place that they knew. They would gather in the gym and talk with each other, and parents could come to a place that they've been going to for the last few years. And so a lot of our schools transitioned to holding their graduation ceremonies on their campuses. Now, it's a great experience for our students, but one risk is weather. And what we know now is there's a projection forecast that there could be some weather events Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Every school has contingency plans, and sometimes those contingency plans go to a second, third, and even fourth option. So as I've looked at it, most of their plans might push a Thursday graduation ceremony to Friday, and then if that doesn't work, on down the line. Ultimately, there may be some gym graduations. I know at least one school, their fourth plan is to separate the numbers of students maybe through the middle of the alphabet if they have to go that far, if they just can't do it outside anytime in that
You
window.
are really getting people tore up and excited at this point. We're talking about all those contingency plans because so many of our families, you've got that graduation scheduled, you've got that party or that get together, you've got family in town and all those kinds of things. But I tell you what, when they do have them on those football fields, wow, we get some gorgeous pictures. Our team, we've covered every graduation the communications department has for the past several years, and the work that the communications team does as far as capturing those events, absolutely phenomenal. But let's backtrack just a minute. Yes, there's rain in the forecast. Yes, there are contingency plans for those graduations. That information will be communicated from each school building should adjustments need to be made.
Thank you for mentioning that. Every school does communicate that. Every school has their plans, and every principal makes those plans, usually with an assistant principal who coordinates the effort. Your comments actually prompted a couple of thoughts in my mind. One, you talked about the beauty of it. I can visualize, and probably will for the rest of my life, a beautiful sunset as I was sitting on the stage at Page High School. And everybody might have an experience like that. I got to mention one other that dates maybe 30, 40 years back. I can't remember how old I am off the top of my head. My high school graduation was scheduled in my stadium in Metro Atlanta, and rain occurred. We had a storm. We ended up doing it in the gym. And in that particular example, my family got 2 tickets. It could have been anybody in the stadium, but just 2 tickets in the gym. The power happened to go out while I was on the stage. And I just remember it, right? And so regardless of what you all experience who are watching this and what our students experience, it's going to be memorable and it's going to be great. And so I just encourage everybody, enjoy the moment if your child is graduating.
And like I said, we will be out capturing all of the graduation ceremonies. We'll do our best to adjust to the contingency plans and get all of that covered. And that will be in our In Focus newsletter, I think the Wednesday after Memorial Day. So we'll have all the graduation photos and celebrations and that sort of thing. So it is an exciting time, and we have more celebrations to share with you as well. What we do at every board meeting is celebrate our state champions, our national champions, etc. We did some of that as we record this on a Tuesday. We had our May board meeting on Monday night, just last night. I feel like I just left here and now I'm back. But anyway, we had many celebrations. And so I want to talk about a couple that I found really interesting. And one of them comes from Summit High School, Superintendent Golden. It's called the MIT Create Challenge. And these students, James Rayfield and Cole Watson from Summit High, created a tool for those folks who have struggles with grip strength. It's a kitchen tool, or who might have arthritis issues. And as I'm aging, I notice that sometimes it's hard to get the tops off of jars and things like that. I just think it's really interesting. And these students won the Create Challenge in that category in product feasibility.
And actually, you mentioned state or national championships. I know lots of folks, your immediate thought goes to athletics, and we do celebrate athletic state championships, but our students are doing so many unusual things, so many opportunities, and you mentioned engineering. MIT produces that program. For our students to win that was incredible, and the device is really an extension of the hand that allows for an improved grip. It's hard to imagine what our students are going to do for our nation over these next few decades. The work that their teachers do in preparing them to give them that proverbial leg up on others, not just in the classroom, but in events like this, opportunities to grow, to excel, to learn how to compete, to learn how to articulate and communicate with others. I'm so excited about what we're doing here and the opportunities that our students have.
I'm going to name drop just a few more. So Ravenwood's Science Olympiad team, first place in state. They had a lot of other individual first place honors as well. The national, this is one of my favorites. You know this. If you know me, the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences. Those are the folks that produce the Emmys and the student awards that they have. Our high school media programs almost pretty much swept those awards. So very impressive. And then speech and debate and drama. We have students that are moving on to the national competition after winning at the state level. So many areas, so many achievements for our students in academics, in athletics, which we've got spring fling getting ready to start. Some of it's already started. And the arts. And so congratulations to all of those students, their families, because we know that they make sacrifices, and to our teachers and staff who support them.
And Carol, you mentioned that competition with creating a device, a new invention. You triggered in my mind something that we're doing at Fairview High School, our mechatronics program.
Yes.
And our mechatronics program it has some robotics elements to it. It's what officially under the state standards is a college and career technical education program. This year, and I've got to double check your notes, Carol, because we had 11 students in that program at Fairview High School get a 2-year degree at the same time they got their high school diploma, a 2-year college degree for Columbia State through that mechatronics program. So those 11 students have already completed 2 years of college through that mechatronics program. And I like to tell this story about the mechatronics program that really just drives home for me the value of our college and career technical education programs. A couple of years ago, the governor visited Fairview High School, and he visited the mechatronics program. And he happened to have a conversation with 2 students who were working together on a conveyor belt mechanism for production and separating different items in a production line. And he asked both of them what they were going to do. One student said, well, I'm going to Georgia Tech and I'm going to be a mechanical engineer. I'm going to major in mechanical engineering. And the other student who was working with that mechanical engineering candidate said, I'm going to graduate high school and get an electrical certification and become an electrician. Those two Williamson County students were working together. And they were producing together. And that's what I see, and that's what I think of when I think about our career tech programs. The state calls them college and career technical education programs, and they really are that. It opens the doors for students no matter what they want to do.
Go in any different direction. We also had 7 students who earned their technical certification. So I think that's a perfect example of what you were just talking about. All right, let's move on to some other things. Get down into the news of the day. TCAP testing took place earlier this school year. Those scores came back on Monday of this week, and we are in the process of sharing that information with those families. Talk about what that looks like for us.
So for us, when we talk about TCAP, the state test grades 3 through 8 in TCAP. They also have end-of-course tests for high school students with a number of courses, some math courses, English courses, history. TCAP has, over the last 2 years, become a much bigger concern, especially at the youngest grades. I mentioned grades 3 through 8. A couple of years ago, the state legislature passed a law that we call the third grade retention law, that if students in third grade don't reach a particular state benchmark, then they were at risk of being retained in third grade. And that rolled to fourth grade as well. They have to show that growth on TCAP. TCAP used to be a good benchmark for us, for those youngest grades, to help give us some insight into where those students might have some deficits to work on next year. Suddenly it became a high stakes test, and we were worried that a third grader might get retained and suddenly be looking potentially at being 19 years old when they were high school seniors. So we are now in the second year of that impacting third graders, and in the first year of that impacting fourth graders. Thankfully, the legislature heard us and heard so many other school districts and heard from so many other parents that just requiring a student to be retained at that young age based on one portion of one particular standardized test was not the right thing to do. So they actually altered that law just this year, where at the fourth grade level, ultimately, if the students don't show that growth, then there will be a conversation between the principals and the parents about what's right for their child and whether the child should be retained. Frankly, that's what our principals have been doing for years with our parents. And it looks at the big picture of all the needs of a student. So we're very pleased with that. We're very pleased with the legislatures deciding that the appropriate folks to talk about that were the professionals at the school level and the parents. So for third graders, what this means is if you don't reach that benchmark, you may have to go to summer school, and that's been in place for a couple of years. We received, as we're sitting here today, those what we call raw scores or quick scores yesterday. Mm-hmm. So parents of every third grader have received a message in our Skyward system letting them know where their child fell on third grade English Language Arts TCAP. So every parent should have that message right now, and they know, might they need to send their child to summer school because of the state requirements? Might they need to plan on some tutoring over the course of next year, or might they need to do both? So that program starts in June. It's basically a 4-week summer school program in June for those students. I will tell you, the state plan was actually good in that the summer school program has been successful. I think our folks have done a great job. It helps students catch up a little bit. It's about half the summer for the students, so we feel like that's a positive. It still gives those students an opportunity to enjoy a month of their summer. So parents be looking for that, especially if your child's in third grade, and then have some conversations with your principals about that. Again, I mentioned fourth grade. We actually have, if I'm not mistaken, 38 students, 38 of our 3,000 plus fourth graders who are going to need to have that very specific conversation with their principal about what's best for their child. There's still some data coming in. At least for those 38 students, we'll get some more information in July from the state because not all the data has come back in. But we're pretty positive and pretty pleased about where we are with our youngest students and them having to deal with that high stakes test at that young age.
Yes. And for our third graders, it's the first time that they actually take that test.
Well, thank you for mentioning that, because when the state initiated that high stakes test at that third grade level, we looked at another offering of the state to take TCAP in second grade. Traditionally, we haven't done it because it's just one more test. We didn't feel like there was enough value in it because we have screeners as well. It was just one more test. This year, for the first time, we are having second graders take TCAP. The main purpose of it is so that when they reach third grade, they've at least got some familiarity with the test. Had it not been for that third grade law, we didn't feel like there was enough value in requiring them to take TCAP in second grade. But again, for familiarization, our second grade students did take TCAP this year.
Well, we had to adjust, so we did, so that was good. All right, let's talk about our budget and that process, because we continue to adjust through that. So tell us where we are in the budget process.
So first, the budget really for us centers around trying to get our staff a pay increase. Inflation continues to grow. We are one of the most expensive places to live in Tennessee, if not the most, from a cost of living perspective, housing, et cetera. So I had a conversation with the county mayor early on in the budget process, and we talked about trying to shoot for a 6% raise for everyone. There are a lot of reasons behind that, but those that I mentioned are really some of the core reasons. It's just expensive to live here. And the old stereotype of teachers not making a whole lot of money is true. Currently, our starting teachers' pay is a little over $48,000. The governor has actually announced that starting in 2025, he expects starting pay for teachers to be $50,000. Largely, the state is going to fund that for a lot of school districts, but because of the state structure, because we're in Williamson County, there's some formulas that put an extra burden on our county. And our plan, in conjunction with county government, was try to stay 1 year ahead of that governor's $50,000 line. In other words, raise that base pay to $50,000 for our teachers this year. What we knew before the budget started, the budget process started, was we were not projected to get enough revenue in the school budget from the state and federal and county to actually be able to do that. We knew on the front end. So our conversation with county government was, let's shoot for it, let's see how close we can come to narrowing the gap, and then potentially ask the county government to fill in that gap so that we could stay that 1 year ahead. We're not there yet. As we've been going through the budget process the last couple of months, we've met with the County Education Committee, County Budget Committee. Our board has looked at the budget multiple times, and we still, as we sit here, are about $10.5 million short. Now that raw number sounds overwhelming, but our budget is large because we serve over 42,000 students. We have 52 schools. The aggregate numbers can feel overwhelming. From a percentage standpoint, it's not that much. It's somewhere around 2% of our budget. So we've got to find a way to close that gap to see if we can get that 6% raise for folks. I expect over the next month or so we're going to be working on that, both schools, the school system and county government, to try to find a way to narrow that gap. So we had a lot of detailed discussions about that at our board work session last week. Our board discussed a lot of those points again last night, and so our board voted to reduce the budget request by somewhere around $11–12 million. We were able to talk about some expenses related to insurance that allowed us to adjust. One of the county commission budget committee meetings actually reduced the budget some to put a responsibility on us to cover some expenses in a different way. So our board voted to move $2.5 million of our request to some capital funds that were available to try to narrow that gap. But again, the responsibility and the burden is going to be on both us and county government to see if we can do it. As I sit here, I don't know the answer. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it.
What happens if we don't?
If we don't, then we will have to ultimately cut our budget. And then we're going to have to address that need next year to try to catch up to the governor's expectation statewide for teacher pay.
I believe you said last night at the board meeting that we're kind of torn between, because we are in the people business. The majority of our budget is people. and you're balancing the raises with the services that we're able to provide.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the majority of our budget. About 85% of our budget is people. And I know a lot of businesses have a similar structure. If you're not a manufacturing company that's actually buying material to create a product, if you're a service economy, largely your budgets are people, and that's what we are. We produce people results, and so 85% of our budget is people. We actually cut about $1 million in our operations budget to try to narrow that gap because we knew this was going to be a tough budget year. So that's part of it, trying to find a way to narrow that gap. And I've mentioned teachers a couple of times. I want to emphasize this is a proposed 6% raise for everyone. About 2 years ago, we made some substantial market adjustments for some of our lower paid positions, what we call classified positions that don't require a teacher's license. Our bus drivers' pay jumped up a substantial amount. So we do that from time to time, make budget adjustments based on market. This one is really trying to bring everybody up by that percentage.
Okay. All right. And folks need to know that we start the budget process early on. It seems like as soon as we start the new school year, the budget process for the next year starts. So go through that timeline with us and tell us what the next steps are.
Well, we actually do start doing our growth projections for the next year in November. And I will tell you that our numbers, our student numbers, have stabilized in Williamson County. For so long, we've been experiencing just this almost overwhelming growth where we're fighting that battle. We've stabilized. We're actually projecting this year 0.49% increase in our student population. That's largely going to be in the Nolensville area where there's still substantial housing. I anticipate in the next couple of years we're going to see some growth pop back up in Spring Hill because there's a really large development and a new interstate exit.
They have already started building in there too. Yes.
That's right. So the growth isn't going to completely go away, but we have some communities that are really established where folks whose children have graduated school are saying, I'm going to stay here. I love it here and I'm not leaving. So we're experiencing that dynamic kind of countywide. So we start in November. Our board ultimately votes on a proposed budget in March, and then the county commission is scheduled to vote on it in June 20th this year. In between all those dates, there's a lot of work, a lot of committee work, a lot of review. For us, our big issue that we're working on right now is our fund balance because we have multiple line items in our budget. We budget for teacher positions, but if somebody leaves in the middle of the year, there might be a little bit of money left over from that position. For all our purchase orders, there might be a little bit of money left over in those purchase orders, and we use that money to help fund the next year's budget. If we know we've got 8 or 9% of what we budgeted last year that we ended up not spending, that rolls to the next year. So for us, over the next month, we're going to be trying to nail down that number as close as possible for funding. There are some other funding issues as well. We get a little bit of federal funding. Compared to our neighbors, it's relatively small.
Much, right.
The state reported last year 3% of our total budget was federal. We largely use that money for special education services. Compared to some of our neighbors, we are tens of millions of dollars less on that. So that's largely in our regular operations budget.
And correct me if I'm wrong, aren't we don't receive as much back from the state as most other districts as well.
That's correct. The state formula for funding has what they call a fiscal capacity indicator, and our fiscal capacity is among the highest in the state, which in turn reduces the share that Williamson County gets from the state. So as an example, on the most recent state report card, which is a year in arrears, the state published that our county government supplies 71% of our total budget. Very different in different parts of the state. So the burden is on our county government to do it, and they've been doing it. We have increased our teacher pay over the last 5 years, the starting teacher pay, from a little over $41,000 to now $48,000, and we're shooting for $50,000. We've had some substantial growth in that because we're trying to create a professional living income for our teachers. We compete with our largest neighbors, and our largest neighbors, generally speaking, pay more for our teachers. And so we are in that competitive battle. Not that different in that sense from other businesses that you do compete with your neighbors. We compete for staffing. The reality is we're a very attractive location for families to come. We know a lot of families make sacrifices to come into Williamson County, buy a home that might be more expensive than nearby because of the excellent work our teachers do. Our parents make a huge difference for our success. And so we know that for us to remain competitive, we need to remain competitive in pay to attract teachers in what has become a much tighter market for teachers. Fewer teachers graduating from the professional schools.
All right, we're going to move on to one board policy that was discussed last night, passed on first reading, and we call it the library materials policy. But we are adjusting that policy based on new state law. So talk about that, if you will. We don't have a lot of time, but if you would discuss that with us.
So over the last few years, the state legislature has made a number of changes to library books, and it seems like every year for the last 3 years there have been some changes. So for many years, we have had a policy that addresses library book selection, kind of the standards for library selection, and a process for parents if they were asking us to reconsider a particular work, a particular book, a process for them to do that. We have actually had to make changes to that process a couple of times already based on recent changes in state law. We were working on that policy adjusting to a prior state law. Meanwhile, a new one came in. So currently we're working on another adjustment. And the state law includes what is described in that law as age-appropriate materials. And so we have the federal law that governs the First Amendment, what we need to provide to students for access purposes, and we now need to balance that with a state law that has some very specific language about items that shouldn't be in the library, and the process by which our school board evaluates those and makes decisions. So there's been a lot of talk about it, and it's really centers around that balancing the First Amendment requirements and the case law that dates back to the 1970s, 50 years worth of Supreme Court decisions on school boards managing student access to materials with the state requirements. We're going to be going through that process. We have to have a new policy in place by July 1st. We just finished our first reading, but there's still a lot of elements that our board members are asking questions about. This is one where we've had to had a lot of legal advice related to the U.S. Constitution. One of those things with schools is the Constitution really matters. We start teaching the Constitution in kindergarten, and we're living it on a daily basis. So that's what folks are going to see over the next month or so.
Superintendent Golden, I think I would like to count the number of times you have said adjust or adjustment during this program, because it's been quite a few. So that's what we do here. We adjust. We're very flexible. So anyway, a few communication notes to share with you as we end this school year, and really we don't stop. We just keep preparing for the next one. We're going to have some new websites. We're doing a website redesign for all of our school websites and for the district pages. So we hope to get those out to you in the middle of June, and so be on the lookout for that and be patient with us as we adjust to the new websites, and we believe they're going to be more user-friendly, and we're excited about that. And also, as we already look to the 24-25 school year, our back-to-school edition of In Focus will be published on July 23rd, and that's only 2 months away. So it just seems like, when one school year ends, we just start getting ready for the next one. So what say you as we end this school year?
We've had a great year. Our students have had a great year. Our teachers have had a great year. The community support has been incredible. We know that success is tenuous. It takes constant attention. And we've probably been the most successful school district in the state, but we know it takes that constant attention. I want to thank our staff. I want to thank our faculty and our parents for supporting us. We need that continued support because it's an ever-evolving process of making sure we do the best for our children. I hope everyone had a great year.
That's right, and we encourage everybody to stay informed and stay engaged in Williamson County schools. Thank you for joining us for the Superintendent's Report. Hope you have a great summer, and we'll see you next time.